Hey y'all, today I want to share with you how to make some simple roll-out sugar cookies. And roll-out sugar cookies are not just for Christmas, but you can make them, any time of the year. But of course, to me, sugar cookies are pretty festive around Christmas time, and it's not really Christmas until I make sugar cookies. So it's always kind of like that, oh, it's time to make sugar cookies, then I feel like it's Christmas. But they're super easy, they're super simple, and if you have a few ingredients, you can make your own sugar cookies. And once you kind of get the knack for it, you're not scared to do it, you can make batch after batch after batch of cookies. So I have some ingredients out here, but first what you want to start off with is, if you have a standing mixer, put the paddle on it, or if you're going to use a hand mixer, you can do that too. You want some really soft butter, a stick of soft unsalted butter. Just put that in the bowl. And if you have margarine, you can use margarine too. I've made it both ways. And if you have salted butter, unsalted butter is best, but a stick of salted butter or margarine will work just fine. Then you want a half a cup of vegetable shortening. This will keep the cookies, they help hold their shape because shortening is 100% fat, whereas butter is fat and water. So shortening helps cookies hold their shape and gives them a better texture than when you're using all butter. You can use all butter, they just will be softer and they won't hold their shape as much. So you want to beat these two things together just for a second to get them combined. Then you want to add 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. Just regular sugar. Just dump it in the bowl. Together until it's smooth and creamy. You don't need to beat it, for a long time, just until it's thoroughly combined, so that it gives the cookies a smooth texture. But if you overbeat it, the cookies can puff up too much, or they can spread out too much because you're going to beat all that air into the butter mixture, and it's going to convert to steam in the oven, and then they're going to really puff up. So you want to be careful not to beat it too much, but thoroughly enough so that it's combined. It's really not that big of a deal. So just use like medium speed, number 6 on a KitchenAid. Now while that's beating, you don't want to mix together your dry ingredients. So in a bowl, and you think, oh, this isn't necessary, you don't want to get a clump of salt or baking soda in your finished cookies, and it's hard to mix in dry ingredients when it's going to be a stiff batter because things don't always mix together as easily. So it's easiest if you mix all the dry ingredients together first, then add them to the butter mixture. So just using the dip and sweep method, just dip the measuring cup in the flour, level it off with a knife, do it again. You want to add 3 cups of all-purpose flour to the bowl. This is just regular bleached all-purpose flour. If you have any kind of all-purpose flour on hand, you can use it. I have found very little difference between expensive flours and store brand all-purpose flour. This is just a store brand all-purpose flour right here, nothing fancy. Use what you have on hand. Then you want to add a teaspoon of salt. It's really going to round out the flavor. Cookies without salt are kind of bland and they just taste sweet. But the salt rounds out the flavor. You get a little bit of sweet and a salty at the same time. You want to add a teaspoon of just regular baking soda. And I'm going to whisk that together just so it's thoroughly combined. I'm going to scrape that down in just a second. This will go a long way in helping your cookies turn out because everything's going to be combined. I spill it all over here. So the mixture will be kind of creamy, a little fluffy. Scrape down the bowl a few times while mixing. This will make sure that everything gets combined thoroughly. As you can see, it's kind of white, fluffy. So when it looks about like that, let's beat it for about a minute. Then you want to add in 2 eggs, one at a time. Now I usually put these in a bowl just so there's no risk of shell. And do that on about medium speed. And beat them thoroughly after each egg so they're thoroughly combined in there. and beat those in. Then you want to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And this is imitation vanilla. If you have, pure vanilla extract on hand, you can use that. But I found no difference when using imitation or pure vanilla extract. And imitation is much, much cheaper. So add it on low speed because I've gotten splashed with vanilla many times. You want to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And it's always when I'm wearing a light colored shirt that then vanilla splatters everywhere. So beat the vanilla in. And then just scrape it down once more. And then it's ready for the dry ingredients. Now, that wasn't that hard, was it? This just, whenever I make cutout cookies, it just feels like it's festive, the Christmas season. So mix that together a little more. And on the lowest speed, mix in your dry ingredients. I'm going to mix in about half until it gets combined, and then you can dump the rest in. And the dough is going to be kind of stiff, so it's easiest if you have a standing mixer. If you don't, that's okay too. But this is such a time saver and an arm saver when you're making a lot of dough. So then you can also turn up the speed a little bit until the dough gets thoroughly combined. You don't want to see any pockets of flour. Don't be afraid to mix it. Mix it all together. Alright, now I'm going to scrape this down. And you want to wrap this dough in plastic and then chill it. Yes, saran wrap here. It's kind of addicting too, so once you start eating dough, you can't really stop, so don't start. So here's our dough. Just kind of scrape it down. Make sure it's thoroughly mixed. Sometimes there's a little bit of butter left at the bottom. There was here, so I'm just going to mix that in. Okay, so then what I like to do is divide the dough in half. Just scoop out half with the spatula onto a piece of plastic wrap. Because when it's divided in half, it'll chill faster. And then you can be making cookies sooner than later. Just put on the plastic wrap. And wrap it up and then kind of smush it to like a round disc. And then I'm just going to do that with the other one. And that's all that it took to make homemade sugar cookie dough. Most of the hard work is done. Now you just have to roll them out and cut them out. And they're going to be so much better than the cookies you get from a box mix or from dough you buy at the store. So, I mean, the choice is yours. I much prefer these, or store-bought dough, or a mix. And they're so much more festive, especially when you get all the ingredients out, the smell of the dough. That's festive to me. I'd rather eat the dough over cookies, but that's not healthy. So when we come back, I'm going to roll out these cookies, and then we'll bake some, and that's all there is to it. Okay, and we're back. I have out some dough that I made a few days ago that's been chilling in the refrigerator. This dough will chill well for probably up to a week. And when it's been chilling that long, you don't want to you want to make sure you get it out a little bit so it can soften up. Because when you chill it, you don't want it completely chilled. You want to chill it for about 15 to 30 minutes, just so it takes some of the warmth off and it firms up a little bit, but it'll be too hard to roll out if it's thoroughly chilled. So I got this dough out about 15 minutes ago, and now we're going to roll these out. Don't be afraid to liberally flour the work surface. especially when you're going to be cutting out shapes. You don't want them to stick to the counter, and especially like when you're doing Christmas trees or something, or I always think of doing like Santa Claus, the feet and the hands will get broken off, and then you have to try to mold it back on, and it just doesn't look as good. So I used quite a bit of flour there. And then you want to kind of just spread it around so you have a large area to work with. Now this was half of the whole batch of dough because we divided the dough in half. And I have the oven preheated to 375. So we're going to bake these right after we roll them out. So I have this rounded dough here. Put it in the middle. And then it works best if you flour the top of the dough. Don't be afraid to use flour. And then flour the rolling pin. You can kind of pick up some flour from your work surface. Okay, brush off the excess flour on the dough. And these French pins are the best. They're so much easier to use than one of those old-fashioned kind. And just kind of roll this out into a flat shape. It doesn't have to be a circle or perfect, because you're going to be rolling this up again, rolling the scraps. And you don't want to roll it too thin. You can, but they're not good thin and crispy. So we have a lot of flour here. Kind of see how thick the dough is. And if it tears apart a little bit, squish it back together and then roll it the other direction. So I'd say that's about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. In between there, if you want them thicker, you can roll it thicker. If you want them thinner, you can roll it thinner. Just watch the baking time because they will bake quicker, thinner. Now I'm just cutting these in circles. You can cut them in any shape you want. So then just cut them all out. In my dough, it never rolls out all evenly all over, so some cookies are thicker, some are not. They're just homemade. The best thing to do is if you have a little spatula like this, to scrape them up. A larger one works fine. And then I'm going to set these on a parchment-lined baking sheet. If you don't have any parchment, you just need to spray it really well because these cookies will stick. So I just take them all up. Now if you don't have a little spatula, sometimes they will work to kind of pull them off of the work surface, but if it was floured really well, it will. That's where if it's not floured, it's not going to work. And these are not going to spread much, so you can put them quite close together. I usually do about 3 rows on a sheet depending on their size. If you're doing large snowmen or something, then you can't do that many. Okay. Now there's those few scraps left, but we'll get those when we roll out the next ones. So the oven is preheated to 375 degrees. You want to bake these, smaller ones like this, would bake for about 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the size. Larger ones can take up to 14 minutes. So go start at about 8 minutes, then work in 2-minute increments until they're lightly browned, puffed up a little bit. Then you don't want them too pale because otherwise they'll be too soft and they won't hold up to frosting. So just bake them on the middle rack at 375 for 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the size of your cookies. And when we come back, I'll show you them all baked. We're back. Our cookies, these cookies were in here for about 10 minutes. But as you can see, they're golden brown. They're lightly puffed up. That one ran together, but that's okay. And they're a little firm at the touch. Now they will firm up as they cool. So you don't want to bake them until they're firm, because otherwise they'll be really dry when you go to eat them. So if they're baked on parchment, what you can do is grab both ends of the parchment and then flip them right off onto the counter. That's one of the joys of baking with parchment, because now these can cool and your cookie sheet can cool. You can continue to use it. So just follow that step, then with every other bit of dough that you have, and cut them out in all different kinds of shapes. Any shape you like. I just can't wait to eat these. They look so good. Here, I'll show you. They're kind of hot, but they're so good. Frosted, those are going to be amazing. So thank you for watching, and I hope you get in your kitchen and bake yourself some homemade sugar cookies.